Okay, we'll bring this meeting to order for another meeting of your House Corporations Committee. Please take the roll.
Representative Chadwick,
Here.
Representative Harrelson,
Here.
Representative Harshman,
Excused?
Representative Knapp,
Here.
Representative Newsom,
Here.
Representative Ottman, Representative Wiley,
Here.
Representative Yin.
Here.
Chairman Olson.
Here.
That's 8 present, 1 excused.
Perfect. So the first bill for our consideration is House Bill 79, Secretary of State Expedited Filings. We have the co-chairman of the Blockchain Committee here, the Blockchain Financial Technology and Digital Innovation Technology Committee. It's a mouthful. All right,
Mr. Chairman,
Representative, please.
as the co-chair of the select committee that you were the former chair of, we certainly do our best to put out high-quality work. So members, I bring to you Cyrus Western, House District 51. I bring to you House Bill 79. And it's one of the issues that we worked in the interim through the select committee work. And as I mentioned on the floor, it's really here for a couple of different reasons. Certainly one of them is that the CFPB, which is the federal agency that regulates a lot of the consumer financial protection information, they have been going through the rulemaking process for years now. And so part of this is to update some of the mirrored language that they have. But a big part of it is the reality is, we're pro-business, right? The Secretary of State's office handles a lot of these filings for all sorts of companies, whether it's an LLC or updated securities filing or trademarks, all that kind of stuff. We are one of the few states that does not have an expedited filing process. I think for us to be, pro-business and to be friendly to some of those businesses, having this as an option, it can be really helpful for them, right? Some of these companies, they want this stuff filed quickly. Not days or weeks or months. They want this to be done promptly, which we want to be business friendly. And if we want to charge them extra money to ensure that happens, I have no problem with that. And that's more or less what this really sets up. And, as I mentioned during introduction, it's for you see Title 17, Title 34, Title 40, that's trademarks, securities filings, that kind of stuff. I think we certainly like to think of ourselves as, in some senses anyway, as the Delaware, the West in terms of attracting business. And this is one of those things that can really help us out and ensure that that happens. Again, we're one of the few states that does not have this. And this is something that we've heard from folks that have specifically said they're not filing with Wyoming because they don't have this option available to them. So, Mr. Chairman, I can go through the bill if you'd like, or I can certainly stand for questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Majority Whip Western, walk us through the bill. So, it starts at the top of page 1. The Secretary of State shall collect fees in advance for, starting on line 1, page 2, expediting the filing of any document filed pursuant to Title 17, Title 34, Title 40, Chapters 1 and 2 of the Wyoming statutes, and a maximum fine of $5,000. So it really just kind of sets that cap of what the Secretary can charge some of these corporations. Again, these are not little mom and pops that have an LLC. These are, big corporations that are worth billions of dollars, so they don't mind paying these kind of fees whatsoever. Title 34 is our securities law, so when they have to do an updated shareholder filing or securities filing, that's Title 34. And of course, Title 40 is our patents and trademarks, so if they need to update some of those filings, that's what that's referring to. Notwithstanding any other law to the contrary, the Secretary of State may charge a fee as specified in this paragraph to expedite the filing of a document filed with the Secretary of State's office pursuant to Title 17, Title 34, and Title 40, Chapters 1 and 2 of the Wyoming statutes upon the request of the filer. The fee and process for requesting an expedited filing shall be established by rule of the Secretary, taking into account the cost of the filing fee and the cost of expedited the filing. The expedition of a filing shall not grant any benefit over a non-expedited filing for purposes of the timing of filing. So I think just it's important to note that last sentence, which a little protection for the small guy, making sure that they're not just going to be stuck at the bottom of the pile, and at the expense of some of these bigger entities that have a lot more money. So, for those of us who have LLCs in Wyoming, which I'm sure is probably most of us here, that we're not all of a sudden going to drop in service too. So that really is the bill. If you have any other questions, committee members are more than happy to answer them. Representative Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we are somewhat in competition with states like Delaware and New Hampshire. What are their expedited filing fees, or do you know that? Or do they have them?
Representative Western.
Chairman Olson, Chairman Newsom, of course, I've got them in my notes and I forgot to bring them down here, but I have to verify what their expedited filing fees are, but depends on the type of filing and the work that will be required to do it, but it's in the thousands in some of those states as well. But I will certainly, well, maybe their secretaries testifying, I can pull up those numbers and get back to you on that. But yes, they absolutely, those are the ones that really pioneered the expedited filing process. And that was kind of a magnet for some of those ones saying, all right, sweet, we can get our filings expedited and processed super quickly, so.
Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, and I'm pretty sure I'm remembering this right, but please correct me, Mr. Chairman of blockchain. I think we made it a maximum of 5,000, so the secretary would have some leeway on what the actual values are and timelines when they actually set the prices. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Minority Whip, that's exactly right. If the secretary wants to set it at $10, obviously that's an option, but it's capped at 5,000. And it elaborates in later on in the paragraph to make sure that there's a correlation between, all right, it's going to devote X amount of man hours, that kind of stuff, to cover the cost of that filing. And so I do think that the secretary's office, it's one of the cash cows in terms of Cheyenne, in terms of the ratio of what we expend to run that office and what that office brings in fees and otherwise. So that's kind of the thought process there, is to give that flexibility to, if they have to make adjustments along the way, that's an option to the secretary.
Representative Western, what is this bill's relation to blockchain or financial technology or digital innovation? Why didn't this bill come through the Corporations Committee to start with?
Chairman Olson, that's an excellent question. I think the Secretary of State's office, there's that integral relationship, that interplay between some of these blockchain companies, which are inherently entity-based, and their ability to file with the office. So absolutely, this bill could have gone through the Corporations Committee, and in the event that it fails, we can absolutely go that option. But given that the Select Committee deals with a lot of these blockchain companies, digital innovation technologies companies, digital currency companies, they're interacting with the Secretary of State's office a lot. And given the interaction of our Select Committee and our dealings with them, we felt that this is maybe not the only avenue, but a good avenue for this legislation, so.
Why did you land on $5,000? I'm guessing it has something to do with what these other states were charging.
Mr. Chairman, that was kind of the idea, was that what's compared to what some of these other states are charging, it gives the flexibility to the secretary. I think versus just benchmarking it directly to what these other states are, giving the flexibility to say, all right, this is what's costing us, so we need to at least charge this, and that ability to adjust those rates accordingly and as needed by the secretary and his staff.
Why give the secretary discretion? Why not just set the fee? What was the discussion on the committee? Why? So I'm trying to figure out two things there. I'm trying to figure out why we need it to be discretionary, why we couldn't just set a fee as we traditionally do, and then why 5,000 is the cap.
Sure. Certainly part of it was, while we want to make sure they cover costs, we want to make sure they're also competitive too, right? And so I think the two interplay factors is, what is our cost to render these services and these filings, to process them, right? Some of them are relatively simple. Some of them take more time and man hours and staff hours. And so that was certainly part of it, to letting the secretary and his staff go through that calibration process, but also allowing the secretary to be competitive and not just, we're doing it at 5,000 no matter what every time for these types of filings. Because while we want to cover our costs and be revenue positive, we also want to have the flexibility to be competitive too, because if we're 30–40% more than Nevada, say, or some of those other kind of states, we want to make sure we're competitive. So
Is that what do other states do that? Do they set it for their Secretary of State's discretion, or do they set the fee?
Mr. Chairman, I will confirm which states, but I remember hearing that some of them do have it in rulemaking where they can go through that process themselves. Obviously not just at the wave of a pen, they have to go through the process and public hearing and all that kind of stuff, but some of them do. And I'll get back to you and confirm which states do that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, maybe just by the time we get it to the floor, I guess, would be fine.
Absolutely, be happy to.
Because I'm just, it seems, it's a little different than what I'm used to. with the fee already being set, so I'm just trying to, I think if we fully understand in context what it looks like with other states, that might be helpful.
Be happy to, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Knapp?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Western, I'm going over that last sentence again and wondering, is that necessary to have it? Because to me, if you're wanting an expedited filing and it's sent in and there's thousands of filings before you, the reason you want it expedited and the reason you're paying more is there is a benefit.
Sure.
So I'm having trouble with that last sentence of,
Chairman Western?
Chairman Olson, Representative Knapp, it doesn't have to be in there, right? I think whether it's in there or whether it's not, we can still get at the main goal of trying to give flexibility to the secretary and to be more competitive with these corporate filings.
Representative Knapp, follow up?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in the logic of it, was there a reason to have it in there?
In some of the discussion, it was just, let's just make sure that other folks, like I said, if you're just filing for an LLC or one of those options, that there is at least some protections. Obviously, I don't think that this secretary, I don't want to impugn intent, but he still wants to take care of some of our smaller entities as well, so.
Representative Yin?
Mr. Chairman, if I may just provide comment and clarity, because I'm also on the committee.
Please do.
So, I mean, the wording is just a little awkward, but the intent there is so we have two lanes, right? So we have the non-expedited filing, and we ensure that those still continue to be processed, but then we have resources available for expedited filing. So the expedited filing won't stop us from processing non-expedited filing. And that's the desire with that sentence, is just so it doesn't get in the way of stopping non-expedited filing while we still allow for that expedited filing as a wholesale. And with the maximum fee, and when the secretary comes up, I'm sure their office is more than willing to discuss it. But I think what happens in most states is that they have several different timelines. So the fastest time costs the most, but there's still different sorts of expedited, like within an hour, or within a day, within 3 days, et cetera. And they have different pricing schedules. And that number allows for that, as well as being agile in competing with other states who have that rulemaking ability, right? So if they see us raise the price and then, or lower the price, and then they lower it even more, and we can't deal with it until the next year. But with the agility of rulemaking, they're able to do it a little faster than we could.
So you're saying, Representative Yin, that what's likely to happen is there's actually going to be a tiered system?
Mr.
There at least
Chairman,
could be.
this allows for the ability of a tiered system, like another state does, for sure.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Western?
if I may, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To build on, I know, for example, during, when we were kind of talking about this, Delaware has that, tiered concept, like, I think they can almost break it down by the hour, where if you want it filed within, that next hour or so, it's costing, I think it was an extra $500 or $1,000 on top of the base fees as well. So it gives us that ability to do that as well.
Representative Ottman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question went along with that, was like, what's it based on if the fee was? So it's being answered, and I'm sure we'll hear more. So thank you.
We're getting there.
Mr. Chairman,
It's a big fee. 5,000 is a lot. So we're just trying to understand it. I think when you put it in, when you're talking about a multi-million or multi-billion-dollar company, it's not. But if you're talking about mom and pop shops,
Of course.
it is.
Mr. Chairman, absolutely. And Representative Ahman, it's really that flexibility. For example, some of these corporations, they want that expedited filing to happen, within minutes, so that, if it's a merger and acquisition, for example, they need to have that incorporated in all those states. It needs to be, the exact same time, at almost down to the minute, right? And I think, which I'm totally fine with that, want to work with them, but if it requires more resources and more time, they needs to be willing to pay for it, so.
The nice thing about how this bill is structured is we're business friendly no matter what. It's up to the Secretary of State to decide if he's business friendly or not. However he sets it, it's on him. It's not on us.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
So that's kind of nice. Thank you, Representative Western.
Thank you.
Secretary of State's office, come on up. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm Chuck Gray. I'm joined by Colin Crossman, the Director of our Business Division, to my left, and Joe Rubino, our Policy Director and Counsel, to my right. After review of this bill, I wanted to note a few things concerning the bill and its implementation by our office, and then I will turn it over to Mr. Crossman if there is anything that I have missed, and we can certainly answer some of those questions that were just asked. So first, I wanted to note a few things about the implementation of this bill by our office. By allowing the Secretary of State's office rulemaking authority to set a fee and provide a process for requesting and approving expedited filings, the bill ensures necessary sideboards to expedite service where appropriate, while ensuring that many of the office's regular statutory filing deadlines of 15 days remain operable. The result, I think, is another tool that will make Wyoming more attractive to business entities looking for regulatory certainty. In speaking with the business community, there is much appetite for this certainty, and I think it is safe to assume that the passage of this bill will add to the exponential growth in business filings and revenue our staff of 11 full-time employees is facing. I will note as well that, Chancery Court bill had this cap as well on the fee making. I can just recall that as well, so I would, digital assets had that as well. So we have another number of examples where this approach was taken by the legislature. That said, I want to note that the bill will add an additional administrative burden. To provide a little background, and I will be happy to have Mr. Crossman elaborate, our office has seen a tremendous and exponential growth in business filings and revenue, which is currently handled by our business division's 11 employees. Our office saw a total increase in revenue of $8.5 million in revenue over the last year alone, up from approximately $43 million in fiscal year 2022 to approximately $52.8 million in fiscal year 2023. That is because of the great work we've been doing in the Wyoming Secretary of State's office to provide great service and attract businesses here. About 75% of this growth in revenue is due to our exponential increase in business entity filings, which have seen growth of approximately 30% over the past year. Initial LLC filings are up approximately 50%, 50. To get an idea of the scale and the number of filings our office handles, in fiscal year 23, our business division processed approximately 600,000 business entity filings, up from 462,000 in fiscal year 2022. Wyoming is second only to Delaware in corporate formation, and that Secretary of State's office has over 200 individuals in their office. During fiscal year 2023, out of the approximately 600,000 business entity filings, approximately 110,000 necessitated manual processing by full-time employees. We expect that this exponential growth will continue as Wyoming becomes more competitive. We also receive over 4,000 phone calls per month and over 3,500 pieces of mail each month. As it relates to manual processing by full-time employees, House Bill 79 will inevitably lead to increased burden, as it will require human intervention to expedite the processing of filings. Our office explained this exponential growth and projected exponential growth repeatedly to the Joint Appropriations Committee over the interim, requesting an upgrade to our existing business filing system, which would have allowed our office to maintain growth in filings. And I want to be clear, clearing up some of the statements made on the floor, that we made those statements repeatedly to the Joint Appropriations Committee. The upgrade was actually a priority of the Buchanan administration, and the work on this upgrade began during the Buchanan administration. During the transition period between administrations, we were told that the intent was to request this upgrade, and ultimately they decided to leave that to the upcoming administration.
Mr. Secretary, are we on the bill?
Order. We're not on the bill.
Are we on the bill or are we
We're talking about the bill, okay?
You can succinctly say,
Mr. Chairman,
you can tell us in 2 sentences.
Mr. Chairman, this continued hostility from Representative Newsom is just not appropriate.
Well, Mr. Secretary, I'm wondering the same thing. I think we are drifting off. You're drifting off pretty far into the weeds. I mean,
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, the upgrade was pulled back. We continued that. It was denied by the joint appropriation. Anticipating we will receive this common sense upgrade, we testified during the joint interim that this bill,
Point of
House
order.
Bill.
Representative Newsom, what's your point?
My point is that we're not litigating what happened in appropriations. My point is $5,000 enough for your office to do expedited filing?
Mr. Chairman, in
Mr.
response
Secretary.
to this continued hostility, we're moving into that right now. That's what that sentence did.
All right, let's move it along, Mr. Secretary. Thank you.
As such, anticipating we will receive this common sense upgrade, we testified during the joint interim that this bill, House Bill 79, could be absorbed by existing staff. I will note, however, that despite the need to upgrade our existing system, our request for the upgrade was denied. As such, allowing expedited filings will put an increased burden on top of an already increasing workload for our office and will ensure that there is an increase specifically of manual processing and intervention by staff. Our office is one of the few revenue centers that the state of Wyoming has, and it is very important that these revenue centers are given the opportunity to thrive and to continue to grow their revenue sources. To understand the scale of this, 2 new positions would be paid for just by the growth in revenue in our office in a little over 1 week. If you take the revenue brought in by the office, 2 positions would be paid for in about a day and a half. While the result will be to make our state even more competitive, the added filings and revenue are not without cost. Therefore, I'm requesting that an amendment be made to House Bill 79 that provides for increased staffing to meet the increase in filings the bill will bring. Now, in response to that last sentence, I want to turn it over to Mr. Crossman to talk a little bit about why that last sentence is there. It mainly has to do with name checks. So if you have if you have an individual filing that is in the queue and subject to the 15 days, if someone filed the expedited filing and with a name conflict, then the question is what moves up? Which one do we grant? And we'll talk a little bit about why we sided with the former. Thank you, Mr.
I think
Crossman.
Representative Yin has a question first.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Secretary, so I do understand your desire for the amendment. My concern, though, is given that you believe House Appropriations might not be super fond of you based on your comments earlier, if we put an amendment in the committee, Mr. Chairman, wouldn't we have to re-refer it to Appropriations versus putting an amendment on the floor?
Well, if I understood the secretary right, unless he just didn't specify this, it was just authorizing 2 new positions with the bill. There's no appropriation.
Nope.
If there's an appropriation, a dollar amount to, we would authorize the FTEs and it would come out of the secretary's budget. If he's requesting an appropriation, then yes, the bill would go to appropriations. Are you requesting an appropriation or just an authorization?
Well, Mr. Chairman, certainly an appropriation. We wouldn't be able to pay for the positions without the appropriation, correct?
Well, you'd have to find it in your existing budget.
Mr. Chairman, that's not possible. I mean, that's not possible.
So then, Mr. Chairman, Secretary, if I may.
Yeah.
My ultimate question is, would you prefer us to have one of the members run an amendment on the floor, or would you prefer us to have it in the committee and then have it be re-referred to appropriations? Because my personal preference is not to have it re-referred to appropriations.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I certainly don't want to continue to have these negative interactions, and I know some don't like me for political reasons. But this is about our state. It's about our office. It's about maintaining positive service. It's about our staff, okay? This is not about me. And, I think it would be preferable to have 2 vehicles. One would be this one, and then one via the budget. And we can see what happens. Other bills have language saying that if the budget has the positions, then those go away. I would certainly be fine with that. But I think it's preferable to have 2 vehicles. And certainly, it will be re-referred, but I just, and I'm in the position now where I got to point out what's causing this hostility. And
Mr. Secretary, what is the 2 FTEs? Let me
Yes.
make sure I understand this. 2 FTEs, and what is the amount that you're requesting?
Mr. Chairman, I believe it's about 150,000, but I think there's an amendment coming. Yeah, so I think with the computers, yeah.
Our staff should have it.
All right, Representative Haraldson, do
Thank
you know
you.
the dollar amount that?
It's 200,000.
It's 200,000. And you have an amendment, and where is it? And why is it not in front of us?
Well, it should be. Ann said that she sent it down. So if we want to just make sure.
Do we have an amendment? I'm getting a head shake no from our secretary, so.
got an email thread that says it's been sent. I will check again.
Okay. Representative Knapp?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Secretary, how many, do you track right now how many expedited requests there are in any given month?
Mr. Chairman, we don't have an expedited process, but go ahead, Mr. Crossman.
Mr. Crossman?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Knapp, there is no tracking of that because we don't have a process, so there would be no mechanism to track it other than anecdotally, and we do receive requests for that, but there's no tracking of it because there's no way to execute on it.
So anecdotally, how many requests do you get?
Since I have been here since April, I have probably received 20 or 30 requests of people asking for it. Does that mean that we've only received 20 or 30? I'm not sure. That was what I bought myself. But of course, if they were researching it themselves, they would know that we don't have that process. I can also speak to other states. I have that data for you if you wish.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, for example, our two primary competitor states are Delaware and Nevada, both of which have a tiered structure ranging from $50 to $100 for small, low-level service, all the way up to $1,000 or more for extreme expediting. And that is just to get the document processed as fast as possible. Here in Wyoming, we have that 15-day component where a document is considered filed the moment we receive it, even if we haven't fully processed it. And that last sentence of that bill that you all have been discussing is related to specifically name checks. So most documents that would need to be expedited don't actually have much of an interaction with other entities. For instance, if you have to file an amendment to comply with an SEC or banking regulation, that would have no effect on other entities in Wyoming. So those are the kinds of things that I've seen and had people ask about expediting, where they already have a company and they need to get something done really quickly to comply with some other regulatory agency in another state or another jurisdiction. If somebody were to want to get a name faster, they can do that online through the online process, and that is an immediate grant.
Any follow-ups to that, Representative Knapp, or?
One, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So in Delaware and Nevada, do you have figures on the number of expediteds?
Mr. Crossman?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Knapp, I do not have specific numbers on how many they process that way. I do know from anecdotally on Delaware that because their filing process is so backed up, they do not have the same 15-day deadline that we do, that pretty much everyone automatically pays for at least some level of expedition automatically. That, of course, creates a backlog, because now you have people who haven't paid that are just getting pushed down the down the line. But in Nevada, I don't have any data on theirs other than to say that they have 3 tiers: $125, $500, and $1,000.
That was Nevada?
Yes, Mr.
You
Chairman,
said
that
it
was
was
that.
125, and what was the high end?
1,000.
1,000? So the two examples you gave us are probably our two biggest competitors, and they're not going above 1,000. So why do we need the range to 5,000?
Well, Mr. Chairman, the Delaware and Nevada both recently raised their rates, and I believe both of them can do it in rule for the expediting filings. And
So they could go above 1,000.
yes, I believe they can. And to make sure that we have some flexibility, it made sense to ask for it in rule, so that we could specify a series of tiers the way they do and adjust those tiers as necessary, and also respond to other states making moves, as Representative Western had detailed.
Okay, perfect. Questions, Representative Ottman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And pretty much what What I have to ask is a point of clarification, so if you could give me that for just a minute.
I'll give you some latitude.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that will be what I'm trying to do, is just wrap my mind around it. Blockchain has been something that I've been watching since before I became representative, mostly because I know so little about it. So what I am thinking here is that with the select committee and what they're attempting and hoping to do, what could be in mass, especially if we get the size of corporations and things like that that may be interested, correct?
Mr. Crossman?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ottman, yes, I believe that that would be an accurate statement. I would also state that specifically with respect to blockchain, that is a very fast-moving field, and there might be a reason why they might have a need to have a document processed very quickly for some sort of regulatory matter in another jurisdiction, and have it on record here, because Wyoming is to some extent unique in our system, where we have, the document is accepted upon receipt, but not filed until we process it. So we're effectively backdating, I mean, not backdating documents, but the received stamp is considered the legally binding day of processing, even though we may not get to it for several more days. Every other state that I looked at does delay their effective date until accepted and filed. So we have a system where we accept it, we can reject it if the document is incorrect, and then they have to go back and fix it. But if we don't reject it, and it takes us 10 business days to process the document, it is considered good the moment we received it, not the moment we finally process it, which does create a bit of a delay. So if you're, for instance, a large entity doing a merger, and you need the document on record because that's what your that's what your counterparty needs, or that's what your regulator needs, or that's what your lender needs, then you may have to wait until we get to it. And with this, would you want to hold up a multi-million-dollar merger because the state of Wyoming hasn't gotten around to your document yet?
Thank you. Follow up, please.
Representative Ottman, follow up.
Okay, so, and what I've also noted over the last 2 years is the creation of the Chancery Court and filling that and having filings and, or the backup in case there's problems with these filings so that we can go there quickly and expedite that business. And that's been, the office has been created, the position has been created, from what I know, and the financial part of it is created. So we have that in place. So if Blockchain Select Committee is ready to roar and the Chancery Court is ready to roar, and our secretary is, can I say that since he's here?
You can say it in committee. Yeah, it's different than on the floor.
Since this office is one, if not the only profitable office that I know of, I would think that the influx of business with the reputation that we have, as well as the world recognition that I've seen Representative Yin bring in from all over the world, I would hope that we would be behind this quite a bit. So my question is to you is, do you think this can be set up by when, if it goes through?
Mr. Crossman?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Ottman, I believe that barring the effective date, we would, once we have the bill passed, we would be able to start the process of crafting the rules, which I am not 100% sure as to what order of operations would have to happen, if we can have the rules pending before the bill goes into effect, or if we have to wait to publish them until the bill is fully effective. But I believe that with that caveat, we could have this, the rules online within the proper period of time after we can publish them.
Well, Mr. Crossman, does your office already have envisioned what it would look like? I mean, I would like to think you already kind of mapped this out in terms of the tiers and what it's going to look like. It should go together. Because I'm thinking, my other thing I'm thinking is why July The only reason we would give you till July 1 is to do that rulemaking, but you've known about this bill through the entire interim, so I'd like to think you're actually ahead of it, so we could give you a sooner date than a July 1st date.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I believe that based on the fact that we would likely mirror what other states have done in terms of tiers, what I would like to do once we have the authority is ask some of the members of the community who we expect would utilize this as to what they would like to see, but I have a pretty good feeling as to where it would land anyway. And of course, the details would need to be worked out, but I don't imagine it would take too long.
If I can add to that too, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Yeah, just, I mean, more of a procedural point in the Administrative Procedure Act. Of course, we wouldn't be looking to do emergency rules. The current effective date is July 1 of 2024. And so once the bill passes and it's signed, then we would begin the rulemaking process. Standard for regular rules is 45 days of public comment, at least, at a minimum. And then from the date of adoption, the governor has 75 days to sign the rules. So that's why we'd be looking at that too, setting the fees in rule.
Okay. Representative Knapp?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Crossman, getting back to kind of the load on the office, you've had a pretty significant increase with 30% filings and 50% LLCs. What is the average time it takes to do a filing? And are we within that 15 days all the time?
Mr. Crossman?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Knapp, yes, to answer your second question first, we have not gone over the 15 days to my knowledge, ever. Right now, I believe we are operating at 11 days or 10 days in that range. Obviously, it changes based on when weekends happen, what we receive in the mail. We received a very, very large amount of filings at the end of the year because of people attempting to get in under the deadline for the Corporate Transparency Act. So right now, we're seeing the usual January, February numbers. But yes, those numbers are continuing to grow. And the other component of having a not to exceed number and the ability to adjust these in rule does give us the flexibility to make sure that that 15-day deadline, that we have the flexibility to potentially deny an expedited filing if it would cause us problems with adjusting our schedule to make sure that we're meeting our statutory requirements.
Representative Wiley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Kosman, first of all, I want to say you guys are doing a good job. I think I've had some experience with it, and you guys get an LLC pumped out in a couple of days. I have another question, though. If we do this mechanism where we're expediting these filings and stuff, do you guys foresee some sort of fallback or something to make sure that these filings are legitimate?
Mr. Crossman?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Wiley, this would not create any additional screening capacity. So the ability to examine these documents in detail, it would be exactly the same, although I don't anticipate it decreasing our screening capacity either. But as I said earlier, it's unlikely that someone would use an expedited service for an initial filing, which is usually the area where there's more problems than filing an amendment or an adjustment to an existing entity. Those are the ones that I anticipate needing an expedited process. And the reason is because if they want to form a new entity, they can do so online, and that is effectively already expedited in that if they pay for it, process it online, pay for it online, and it's entirely an online process, they get that company immediately. So there would be these numbers and the process for expedited service would not apply to initial formations of LLCs, nonprofits, and profit corporations. In addition, I think it had been mentioned earlier that it would small business be affected by this? And I would answer that in the negative because they would still have that 15-day deadline. They would potentially want, if they wanted something fast, like a larger corporation, sure, but at the moment, they wouldn't necessarily need that. So if they need it, it's there for them and it's a new thing, but if they don't need it, then there would be no reason to pay for it.
Okay. Representative Haroldson, I see we have your amendment in front of us. I'm not saying you did this because it sounds like you emailed it, but we're not going to have any amendments by ambush. So in the, in the future, just kind of follow through and make sure the amendment actually gets to us. The protocol, the civility protocol is the same on a committee as it is on the floor.
Okay.
If you have an amendment, the right thing to do is discuss it with the chairman of the bill and get the amendment to your committee, so it's not, not a kind of a last minute thing. And I'm
Okay.
not saying you did it on purpose, I'm just giving you kind of a heads up to maybe follow through to make sure it gets there next time.
Absolutely. So I requested it with LSO this morning, probably around 9:45 after I got out of committee, and then it just got somewhere blocked between upstairs and down here on the email. It should have been sitting in front of us when we
Got
got
lost
here,
in the digital world.
somewhere out there.
Okay.
So-
Very good.
So with that, do we want to discuss an amendment right now?
We still have public comment, so let's finish
Beautiful.
public comment, and then we'll, when we come to the bill, we'll let you move your amendment. Do we have additional public comment in the room? Yes, Mr. Kaufman. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt Kaufman, as many of you know, I'm a governor appointee to the Select Committee on Blockchain. I'm also a corporate practitioner with the law firm of Hathaway & Coons here in Cheyenne. I thought I'd just provide a couple of comments because I was one of the proponents through the interim of this bill, just to maybe give a little bit of context as to how I see this bill being so important to the corporate practice in Wyoming. Really, to me, this doesn't really impact LLC and corporate formations. As Mr. Crossman said a few moments ago, we have those available online now, virtually immediately. Our Secretary of State's office does an amazing job with that. So to me, this isn't about people just wanting formations faster. We already get those really fast. Where this comes into play is the competitive aspect of Wyoming with other states when companies are choosing what state to domicile their transaction in. And, I'm part of a number of listservs of corporate attorneys across the country. I can't even tell you how many times I see the conversations amongst corporate practitioners choosing Delaware over Wyoming because we don't have an expedited filing. The reason that happens is, again, this has been alluded to, oftentimes in merger and acquisition transactions or conversion transactions, federal regulators require a date certain for an entity to undertake this corporate transaction. As it currently stands, again, through no fault of our Secretary of State's office, if I was facilitating a merger between a Delaware and a Wyoming entity and we were choosing which domicile the surviving company was going to be in, we may need, and I'll give you a perfect example. This last year, I participated in helping a Wyoming company merge with a Delaware company for purposes of being listed on the NASDAQ stock exchange. The NASDAQ required a date certain to know when that merger was going to be effective for filing purposes before the merger could be filed. Delaware has an expedited filing process where they could guarantee a date certain for that effective date. Wyoming doesn't, right? So the company simply chose Delaware as the domicile over Wyoming because we don't have that process. Now, as has been alluded to, some practitioners like myself beg and plead and use our relationships with those in the Secretary of State's office to sometimes try to get things rushed through. That's a really informal thing. That's unfair, to ask the Secretary of State's office to constantly be worried about doing. So again, from my perspective, this is a mechanism. Again, speaking personally, I don't see this being abused by practitioners just wanting things faster. If you're just setting up an LLC, you're not going to pay an extra $1,000 just to get it a few days, quicker. What this to me really comes down to is, again, providing the date certain for those oftentimes regulated entities, whether it's banks, companies. I'll give you one more example. There's a Casper manufacturing company that I represent and work with closely. This past year, we were doing a federally regulated SEC offering. We needed to amend the articles of incorporation, right? That's not an electronic filing that we currently have through our Secretary of State's office. Again, no blame to the Secretary of State's. It took about 2.5 weeks to get that document approved. That held us up with the SEC, right? Because the SEC couldn't advance that transaction until that document was filed and approved. If there was expedited filing available, it makes it that much more attractive and that much easier for companies to facilitate those transactions. So again, no comment on the budget or any of that kind of stuff. That's beyond my pay grade. But I just wanted to provide some context as a practitioner that this is a really important tool. And it's just, I hate to see Wyoming lose corporate domiciles over not having something like an expedited filing. So for that, I'll stand any questions. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Kaufman? All right, thank you. Mr. Secretary, how do we get an online amendment filing process in your office?
The upgrade was part of that.
The 3,000 or the $3 million,
The upgrade, which was negotiated around $1 million, is actually $5 million.
that upgrade would have created an online amendment process. Any other public comment? All right, I will close public comment. Committee, what is your pleasure? It's been moved by Representative Haroldson and seconded by, was that Representative Ottman? He'll defer to you. Okay. Amendments. Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the amendment that I have would just be a deletion of the current section 2 with the insertion of a new section 2 that would give us 2 full-time positions with an appropriation of $200,000. But it also has a mechanism in there if for some reason this goes and gets put into the budget, this will be stripped out. So that way we don't double up or get 2 horses to the end of the race. So. Mr. Chairman, can we have
Representative-
discussion on the amendment before we make a motion? Is that appropriate?
Well, first we'll start with a second. We have a second on it, seconded by Representative Ottman. Now we can discuss the amendment. You want to discuss the amendment, Representative Wiley?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, from what we've heard today and you know, the presentation from the good secretary, I think that maybe we don't include this amendment and we could run it with either the representative from where the land is, you know, the land of wheat, or the representative where the camel runs on coal. And I would support this being moved on the floor. And I can tell you that now, but I think moving forward, I will probably not vote for the amendment coming out of committee.
Okay. And just so you are aware, for the new representatives in particular, there is a rule that allows for the re-referral of the bill to committee number 2, even after it's been placed on committee of the whole. So I know this because I had that happen to me once with a bill. So just because you make the amendment on the floor doesn't mean the bill won't go to appropriations. It could still end up there if they act on it on the re-referral. When it's coming out of this committee, if it has an appropriation, I, as a chairman, have the responsibility of re-referring it because it has the appropriation. But I'm just letting you know for voting purposes, if it can still end up there. So, Representative Yin.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. You know, there was a reason I directly asked the secretary, and his desire was to have 2 horses in the race and have this in the bill in committee. So I'll respect that wish. He will be the one to have to fight for it when it gets re-referred to appropriations. So it was only a consideration of whether he wanted to have that happen or not. And if he wants that, then I will vote for the amendment.
Representative Western, this is your bill. Do you have anything to say about the appropriation? And give me some idea of, was this, the administrative impact isn't new to the Secretary of State's office. I'm assuming that when this bill was being drafted, the secretary knew that there was administrative impact. So was there any discussion on the committee about funding positions then?
Mr. Chairman, so this was, of course, we wind the clock back to this fall. There was some discussion, obviously. We were under the impression that there would be an attempt at that software upgrade that would not require 2 more positions. Obviously, I don't want to, rehash old discussions or old disputes, but I'm not an expert on the intricacy of this system, certainly to the extent that the Secretary of Staff is. So if it's necessary to get it done, I say so be it.
Okay. Mr. Secretary?
Well, and Mr. Chairman, what I was trying to do in that section was lay out why initially we said, we made that statement. We assumed that it included the upgrade. That's why we got into that, so,
You're telling us why it wasn't in the bill originally.
Right.
Your appropriation.
exactly. That's what I was trying to do there.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Further discussion on this amendment? Representative Yin?
So let's say we assume 1K will be what will be the initial max filing price for an expedited filing. 200,000 is 2 FTEs, so, and that's for the biennium. So for a year, we would need at least 100 expedited filings to make up for the cost of that, those FTEs. And so that's just the only consideration that I'm thinking about of whether the appropriation is worth the bill or not. I think that's likely, but I guess we'll have to see, and we will definitely see in 2 years for sure.
Was this a biannualized number, Mr. Secretary? Or is it only intended to get you through the supplemental budget?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Mr. Chairman, are you talking about the,
The $200,000, is that for 2 years or was that for 1 year?
Through June 30th, 2026.
So 2 years. So that's 2 years of salary for 2 positions and benefits?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have the same hesitation that you do. You're good appropriations individual. I do not. I think that may need to be a little higher.
Yeah,
I think that's 1 year.
I think it is.
I think you're
it's
right.
Meant to be 2 years.
It's meant to
Yeah,
be 2
but it's
years.
not
I
enough.
asked for that.
Maybe I should have done it.
Now it's how many filings? Mr. Representative Western.
Mr. Chairman, and I'm certainly not an expert, and I'm just simply kind of brainstorming here a little bit, but there's also the possibility of just simply creating the 2 FTE positions and allowing the secretary to pay for those with SR revenue, internal revenue. Obviously, I'm not an expert on Title IX statutes, which is our ANI and those kind of processes about what money can be used to pay for who. But certainly that's an idea, one that I'm not integrally an expert on and the nuance of it, but it is a option. I don't know if the secretary has a position down one way or the other, but versus an appropriation from the general fund.
Mr. Secretary?
I mean, Mr. Chairman, we pay for our compliance division positions through special revenue, but business division, we have not typically done that way, so it would be a new approach, and happy to discuss it. I mean, it would be a change. So would you pay for it out of our compliance special revenue off? We couldn't do that, because that's off, so it'd be off the business filings?
I think
And
so,
what would be the cap on that, just the amount?
probably. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's fine.
There's
Yeah.
no new general fund.
Yeah,
Win for everybody.
fine with that.
We do still do, it's still appropriate.
No, it's still an appropriation. Appropriations authorizes the SRs as well.
So it would be a correction from general fund to.
Special revenue. Mhm. At 400,000. Do you just want to amend your amendment?
Yeah, you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, it'd be easier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I amend my amendment to read on line 9, 400,000 from the special fund to the Secretary of State Office for the salaries and benefits of the positions.
From, you said from the general fund? Oh,
Special,
from special revenue. Okay.
special revenue fund.
Representative Ottman, is the second okay with those changes? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just,
Representative Yin?
can we grant some leeway to LSO to just ensure that
That's written
it's
properly?
written properly for
Yeah.
money from filings would be where that money would come from.
So you understand what we're trying to do with the amendment, so that if they contact you, you can, okay.
I can talk to Ann.
Okay. How is our secretary tracking?
Well, I have line 9, I changed it to 400,000 from the special revenue fund, is that what
And
you
it would
said?
it would be lines 8 and 9, because you'd want to adjust the written number as well.
Yes, yes.
And then yet we put in special revenue, but what we want, we're not exactly sure on the wording. We want to make sure that it's from the filings themselves is what it is. The money comes from the filings.
From the filings of this revenue?
Yep.
Okay,
And Representative Haroldson will get with LSO as well to make sure we get that right. If this passes. Any other discussion on the amendment? Ready to vote on the amendment? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. That amendment is adopted. Back on the bill. Any additional amendments to this bill?
Question on the bill.
Any discussion on the bill? Question on the bill? Will you please do a roll call vote on House Bill 79?
okay. Representative Chadwick? Aye. Aye? Sorry, I didn't hear. Representative Haroldson? Aye. Representative Harshman has submitted an absentee vote of aye. Representative Knapp?
Aye.
Representative Newsom? Representative Ottman? Representative Wiley?
Aye.
Representative Yin?
Aye.
Chairman Olson?
Aye.
That's 9 ayes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Secretary and his office. Thank you, Co-Chairman Western. Hey, is this your first time presenting as chairman a bill to the House side? Yeah. And you haven't presented one to the Senate side? So this is your very first blockchain bill right here? Moving through the process as chairman? Yeah, well, on your side? Yep. All right. We should have tabled it. Okay. Representative Banks, after watching that transpire, how do you feel?
Skeptical.
All right, our next bill for consideration is House Bill 81, Public Officer Training Amendments. We have the sponsor of the bill, Representative Banks. Go ahead and introduce us to the bill and then walk us through it.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. A little background on the bill. I'll be quick with our time crunch. This was brought to my attention this summer by constituent groups of all kinds, whether that be districts, boards, also our county commissioners, county attorney. Everybody was really concerned about this. So due process reached out to the department, and basically they said that they are bound by the statute. And so me being just young freshman, contacted one of my senators who also reached out and got the same answer. So in response to that, we said, okay, we're going to draft a bill that amends the statute to give them flexibility to do what they need to do, as well as not make it so overwhelmingly burdensome for our volunteer boards. So if you look there on page 2, we start by amending the place where it was really catching us there, and that's the minimum. It was bound under everything was, we have to do this because that's the minimum. And so instead, we take out that language and allow the Department of Audit to continue to offer training for those who handle financial accounts as was intended. So you can see that language that just complies with that throughout the bill. And then there on 19, a very important aspect that was concerning was being able to make some of these meetings. And so what we did was make it so a virtual format of the training has to be offered. So it's convenient, people can do it on their own time, they don't have to take off of work at their own expense for something that they volunteered to do. There on page 3, probably the biggest piece that was recommended by the county attorney to remove was the provision that would remove people elected to those positions for noncompliance. She was worried that we were getting into legal troubles there if we had that in the bill. So under that discretion, that was removed from the bill, or excuse me, removed from the statutes under this bill. Also pointing out there, section 2, Wyoming statute 91510A, Romanet 2 is repealed. And if everybody wants to see this, see what that says, I've got a copy, or I can just read it to you, Mr. Chairman, whatever is your preference.
Yeah, tell us what the repealer is.
Okay, so the repealer repeals the language that says, for entities managed by a governing body, members of the governing body with oversight over the person or persons directly responsible for handling the accounts of their public office. So that is the language that was getting our, especially people like drainage districts, cemetery boards, really who don't have anything to do with finance. But they were getting caught, and might I add, already or have training provided for them. If you serve on a board or district, WAM and other organizations have training that's already provided. So making them double dip into that, we felt was not something that we really wanted to do. But this language was caught into saying, well, you belong to that drainage board, you've been there for 40 years, but we still haven't and have no problems, but you still have to go through this. And talking with some people on that committee who drafted this, that wasn't the intent. And so just kind of cleaning up some language to make it more along the lines of the intention that if you are in charge of the books and the financial accounts, then we want to offer you some training. And we feel that would be adequate for that organization. So basically, in a nutshell, Mr. Chairman, that is the intent of that bill, and I would stand for any questions you or the committee would have at this time.
Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I wanted to say thank you for bringing this because I've heard also the grave concern. But I was very happy when this bill was introduced in the beginning because I've been dealing with some districts, special districts, that have no idea. I also serve on management audit where there was 170 or 270 districts that were out of compliance when the deadline rolled around. And their reason, sometimes it's because people are put in to positions and nobody ever talked to them about it. So I guess what I'm wondering is if not only the financial officer, which could be a secretary or something, but if the admin is not aware of the criteria of running that district appropriately, what in here will still, are they still required to do it? Or there has to be something. I mean, so the training's available, but are they required as a district to make sure that their people are trained?
Representative Banks.
So for clarification, is, for example, a board chairman or a district chairman, the chairman of the drainage board, your question is there anything that would require them to also be trained under this provision?
Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, because a lot of times, say with the irrigation districts, there could be a secretary brought in to work and to do the books that has no idea. So how is she supposed to find out? Or he? And if one particular administrator I talked to had no idea himself that there were requirements and that they were statutory. And so they were out of compliance, and he was not happy about the whole situation, but it's law. So I guess what I'm wondering is the Department of Audit going to make that clear with the training manuals or whatever, or does this bill take that out, I guess is what I'm saying. Thank you.
Representative Banks?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And that did come up into discussions, and what we kind of came to the conclusion of is most of the time, especially in elected bodies, the secretary or treasurer, a lot of times is a paid position, and they stay longer than elected boards. Say like the city council, they're elected, they come and go. But the clerk and treasurer is a hired employee that stays longer normally. And so we felt that they, knowing that what's going on and under this provision, they would be the one that it's over, would have the knowledge and ideas that this would be going on, was the conclusion we came into. But I'm certainly not opposed to saying if we need to include language that says we need to make it more advertised or something, just so people are aware that it is available.
Representative Newsom?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I guess the way I read that this was written without this stricken language is that if somebody is a public officer, if they've been appointed or elected, but if there's a hired person, then it's the obligation of the board to provide that training, not the obligation of the state to provide that training. So as I read this, before it's changed in any way, it was that the intent was that somebody that's appointed or elected does the training, but a paid staff would not, maybe not even be eligible. I'm sure the state would allow them to participate, but that's the obligation of the board, whatever the board or district is, to train their staff, to provide training for their staff, is my understanding. And everywhere in this that you read, it says public officers and their offices and public officers. It never says anything about staff.
Representative Knapp?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, I'm trying to get in my mind what this solves. So there's two problems when it comes to boards. One is something that Representative Ottman mentioned, which was boards being out of compliance when it comes to audit. And they do have a fiduciary responsibility, whether it's a large board like a county or a small board, but especially those boards in between that sometimes can handle tens of thousands or even millions of dollars from state monies or from public monies. So is this bill intended to ease the burden off of those boards? But then what solves the other side of this of having education and having an idea of fiduciary responsibility when you're in a board? I realize it's hard to get board members in the first place, but they are dealing with public funds. So could you answer that question?
Representative Banks?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yeah, so to answer kind of both of those, yeah, that was brought up in conversations in kind of the drafting this as well. And the language is still included, so they still offer the training. The training is still there. And it says there on line 7, provide comprehensive written materials. So different things about handling those proper funds as well. And it's nothing, and there's nothing in there that says that we're exempting them from being non-compliant with any of the audits or anything. If you look in page 3, it's still, the language is still, if any public officer willfully neglects or refuses to handle his accounts in that manner required, then there's still disciplinary action that can be instituted. It is easing the burden a little bit, but I think it still has enough provision to say that you still have to be in compliance.
Representative Haroldson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess I'll just weigh in because I too got those calls. Like a Whedon Pest Board that said, hey, why are we packing everyone up, driving to Cheyenne for an 8-hour day when I've been doing this longer than you've been alive? Quote unquote. And so my question is here, from what I'm reading, and just correct me if I'm wrong, this isn't saying they won't be instructed. This is just eliminating that mandatory 8-hour, because instead of it saying, hey, here's a good 30,000-foot view of what you need to know as a board, it turned into a Department of Audit 8-hour workday. And most people walked away from it going, I don't even know what they even talked about. And this is saying, hey, let's keep it simple. Let's keep it where they can understand, and let's let them do their job. We're going to give them the proper material they need to be educated. And if they're out of compliance and we've given them the proper material, it's on them. Is that correct? Am I reading this correct?
Representative Banks?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Haroldson, yes, that's kind of the general idea of it is, and I've heard people say, I would love to take this. I would love to, if it was a video that I could watch and then go through some different modules or something on my own time, that would be great. But I even had some people say, look, I've been on this board for 20 years because nobody else will run for it. And if I have to do this, I'm done. And then you guys are stuck with nobody there. And so, yeah, mitigating we're covered because we have the training for you, but we're not going to be telling you, go down and take this 8-hour training that you're not really gonna learn anything from anyway, because you're a predator manager on a predator management county board, not a finance accountant.
Representative Yin?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I kind of wish Secretary Gray was still here because he was on management audit when this section was passed. So basically, everything we strike is from the last budget session, 2022. We had a House Bill 60 that came from management audit that introduced all this training requirement, because I think the concern was, again, that we had lots of small special districts that weren't doing their accounting correctly or at all, and no one knew whether they were doing anything right. So we had this training, and the training, actually, I'm looking at the bill that we enacted. They're required to have that training done by July 2024. So they still have time to do that training if for some reason this doesn't pass. But I think for the committee's edification, it's important to clarify what public officer is defined as in the current statute and then with the repealer, right? So we're talking about training for public officers. Public officer is the person who is directly responsible for handling the accounts of their public office. That's I. And then the repealer deals with II, which is the governing body that has oversight of that person. So you're talking about the treasurer, who could be a hired position. That'll be considered a public officer. But if we pass this bill, the governing body over that public officer is not also considered public officers that require training. Is that correct?
It's just the secretary.
Just the one that
treasurer,
actually does
whoever's handling the money.
handles the account.
Representative Banks?
Yes, that would be correct.
Thanks.
Representative Banks, did you work with and discuss this with the Department of Audit?
The good senator that I worked with and I tried to, but we got, for lack of a better term, stiff-armed.
Okay. Representative Newsom?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am a member of our lodging tax board, and I had the pleasure of spending that 8-hour day here in Cheyenne. Fortunately, I was here for another meeting, and I found the information valuable. However, I think it could be delivered in a way, in a more condensed version, and get the same value in online, in a virtual, and that the other challenge is these boards change over all the time. That training was offered maybe 3 times. So unless we want the Department of Audit to offer it in person once a month, which pretty sure they don't want to do. I haven't checked with them, but I'm pretty sure they don't want to do it. I think that we just need to look at the delivery method and maybe have them modulize it in such a way that if you are that fiscally responsible person, maybe you take an additional module that talks about fiscal responsibility. But there was some good information, but, you know, that's 8 hours I won't get back in my life. And they did a fabulous job. I must say that the presentation was good. They gave opportunity to ask questions from online and from in person, so I have no issue with the training. It's just that it was arduous. It was an arduous process. And that you could be removed from your board or from your district, especially if you were elected to a cemetery district or something like that. I think that's unconstitutional, so.
All right. Wouldn't you agree, Representative Banks?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I would.
All right, we only have 10 minutes left, so let's get some more public comment in, at least finish out public comment, and then we'll discuss the bill. Additional public comment? Are you from the Department of Audit? We are. All right. Do you mind if we take them up first, and then we'll move to you, Commissioner? Welcome.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Justin Chavez, Director of the Department of Audit. I have with me Mike Hansen. He is our Public Funds Administrator, the division responsible for the training. So I'll start off by saying I'm going to kind of, in the interest of time, kind of reorganize what I was gonna say, because I think there's other people that want to talk. So I'll try to address a couple of concerns. Again, one of the main concerns, time. As Representative Yin pointed out, the requirement for training doesn't actually start until July 2024. We were proactive in trying to get stuff in place so we could see how it was going to work and make appropriate modifications. With the discussion of the committee, I will point out that currently, including ours, there are at least 3 virtual options on demand that anybody can go out, take it at their own pace. 2 of those 3 are free, the longest of which is 2.5 hours. So we have already addressed the concerns. You know, Representative Banks called us back in August. Again, that was the very beginning of us trying to put this together. And so we've been clear with those who we are putting the training on and those who are required to take it that, hey, this is a work in process. We have other options that are in the pipeline. It just takes time to get to that. So I just want to reiterate that there are at least 3 options on demand, online, at whatever pace you want to do, and 2 of those 3 are free. And so I think that addresses one of the major concerns. Second thing that I want to make sure I address is the governing body and how important it is that the governing body is involved in the internal control process and structure of the organization for which they're a governing body. Commonly, through our audits, one of the main causes of our audit findings is a lack of involvement by the governing body, either because they don't know what they should be doing or don't know what they could be doing. They have, say, for example, their head finance person saying, you don't need to look at that, or you shouldn't look at that, or you can't look at that. And that's not true, so they don't, and then it causes a problem. Virtually every fraud we work on, that fraud was perpetrated in large part because the governing body was not involved in that internal control structure. So I just want to make comments about how important it is that governing bodies are knowledgeable and involved in the internal control structure when it comes to public funds. We have a wealth of other information that could answer questions that have come up, but you know, we're running short for time. I'll stand for questions now, but if any committee member has any questions about anything we do, feel free to reach out to us.
Questions for the Department of Audit? All right, thank you. It's helpful. Commissioner Malm. And then you coming up, just line up on deck. I assume you're not coming together, but maybe you've joined forces.
Mr. Chairman, Committee, Gunnar Malm, Laramie County Commissioner for the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. So we speak in favor of this bill. Obviously, as mentioned, there's a number of potential issues with how the bill currently exists. I'm an independently elected government official who, was chosen by my voters, and I actually don't touch any money ever. Like, that's how the system works. We have a clerk, we have a treasurer. But I'm required to take the training. Full disclosure, I haven't taken it yet. But I think there's also confusion. I just heard it doesn't start until July 1st, 2024. So is that the year that you have to take it is that year? Because I believe everybody that I'm familiar with has thought you have to have taken it by July 1st of 2024, or the governor will potentially remove me from office. It's an interesting proposition and one I thought about testing, but I think that the real crux of it isn't me. I'll take a course. It is these volunteer boards that we have that do make our communities work. If I have to tell a rancher that comes in once a month to sit on our landfill board that he needs to find 8 hours, and I guess there's other modules, but I've got to get him connected to the internet to take a online course. But that he has to come in and do another 8 hours so that he can serve on this volunteer capacity that he otherwise would probably be making money. It's very hard, and we see these boards struggling to get people to serve. And so I think that this is a good attempt. I appreciate Representative Banks and his work on this and looking for a solution that still adds some checks and some education for these folks, but allows us to do it in a little bit softer way. That's not, the threat of the government what you get rewarded for volunteering is the threat of government coming after you. Like, that just doesn't sound appealing. So I'd appreciate your guys' favorable consideration.
Questions for the commissioner? Representative Ottman?
Mr. Commissioner, as an elected official, I'm sure you always have people coming to you wanting money and wanting to know where their money's spent and what you're doing about it. And so if they could understand on the special districts and different things, how that mechanism works and how it all flows and what your responsibility is and isn't, wouldn't that knowledge, that basic knowledge, is like, I'm in a world where there's lots of training, one for education, but also in industry where safety meetings, one after the other, after the other, after the other, are for the protection and the propriety of the business. And so I'm just wondering, you don't see any value in that or necessity?
Mr. Chairman, through you. Representative, no, certainly there's value. I think that just how it is structured at this time with the levers of power that are on it, that it could be done better. And I think this amendment to the original bill still allows for that education. It allows for all those board members to still have access to that education, but it doesn't have that hammer above our volunteer board's heads saying you will do this if you want to serve in your community. Even in the lowest level of capacity where you have no access to funds. And so I think knowledge is power, but I would also, note that just because we hold these classes and people go to them, it does not mean we're not gonna have people not file reports on time or not have issues. Like, it's still gonna occur.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Malm. Mr. Farmer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Brian Farmer, Wyoming School Boards Association. Want to let you know that we stand in support of this bill as well. I think the original intent of the legislation was good, but I think we pushed a little too hard on the gas. All this bill does is let up on that. Like Commissioner Malm, who, by the way, was one of my former students at the University of Wyoming, we thought that this requirement was supposed to be completed by this July 1. So I was actually going to ask you to change the Section 3 effective date to make it effective immediately. If it is intended to be completed by July 1 of 2024, you're providing no relief with the bill. If there is additional time, then I think that July 1, 2024 is okay. But we would have asked that you do look to provide relief. Mr. Chairman, when you speak specifically about schools, I would submit that there is no government in the world that has greater transparency or greater accountability than Wyoming's public schools. If you look at the amount of school finance reporting that is required by law, it's immense. And I think that's a good thing. I think that that's a great way for Wyoming schools to be accountable for those public funds. But later here in this statute, at, I think it's 91513, it creates for the Director of Department of Audit a whole division to audit schools. And schools are audited annually. And so then you have these questions about, so what about the governing body? What about having training for the governing body? And I will tell you, Mr. Chairman, every single year, that is a part of the education of the governing body through that audit process to talk about internal controls. Because we have an annual audit, it is brought to the attention of the governing body whether or not there are deficiencies, whether or not there ought to be changes. And so much of what is required by the training is covered by the order of business of the school district, as well as the training itself. So we do support the repealer. We do support the language as it is presented. And as a matter of fact, Mr. Chairman, I know there was another House Bill 65 from Representative Summers that had language, the minimum training requirement shall not exceed 4 hours, and the minimum training requirements may be completed in a virtual format on a public officer's personal time. That concept might be a good additional amendment to this bill, to put a cap on that training time and to require that it be provided in multiple formats. I think it's fantastic that the auditor has been proactive. That the Director of the Department of Audit has been proactive in doing that. But Mr. Chairman, an apple and an orange and a carburetor are not the same thing. When my school board members go to this training, it is by and large designed for state or county individuals, and to some degree, the information that is provided to them is not accurate. We are working on a school district specific training, and we hope to have that. But the information presented by the state is designed for other entities and not entirely correct when it comes to the structure of a school board and a school district. So ask for your favorable consideration of the bill. Ask that you keep it largely as is and potentially provide that additional guardrail. Again, it keeps training in place. It doesn't say we're not going to have training. It just says let's lighten up on the gas pedal a little bit. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Representative Wiley?
Yeah, could you give us that language again in the bill that you referenced?
It's House Bill 65.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it is really just language in House Bill 65. It itself does not effectively fit in because Representative Banks has talked about removing minimum training requirements. So you might just say the training requirements shall not exceed 4 hours, and training requirements may be completed in virtual format on the public officer's personal time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Farmer. Any additional public comment? Any public comment online? I'll close public comment. Closing public comment on House Bill 81. Committee, what is your pleasure? Been moved by Representative Chadwick.
Second.
Seconded by Representative Yin. Amendments to this bill. Representative Wiley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to kind of bumble through this, so any help will be appreciated after I try to get my thoughts out of here. So I would move to adopt the language to not exceed 4 hours, and that personal or public officers can use their personal time to do it, and that can fit in the bill wherever necessary. And then the second part to my amendment would be page 3, line 1, after required by law. Just say trainee must swear to be a bona fide recipient of public officer training.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
What was the last part?
The last part is page 3, line 1, after required by law, insert trainee must swear to be a bona fide recipient of public officer training.
Where are you getting that from? You just came up with that?
Mr. Chairman, my intent is to have a mechanism to where they swear that they've done the training, and it's already in the green books, the languages for the definition of bona fide.
Okay. And on your amendment, I think the other part of it was the minimum not to exceed 4 hours, use personnel time, and it may be virtual.
So, Mr. Chairman, in the bill, we actually, there's no more minimum training requirements. The Department of Audit just doesn't establish minimum training requirements at all. So there's, setting a 4 hour doesn't matter because there just aren't any minimum requirements anymore.
Well, hold on a second. Was there a second? Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Newsom. Now go ahead.
They're just, unless we reinsert the language, having them establish minimum training requirements, it doesn't matter where we put 4 hours because there just aren't any.
Well, I think, isn't it supposed to be, I think it's confusing how it was worded. Minimum training shall not exceed 4 hours, but it's really a maximum. Just training shall not exceed 4 hours, I think is what it's trying to do. So it's not setting a minimum, it's setting a maximum.
So sure, we could put, there's no required training, so saying 4 hours at all doesn't matter because there's no longer a requirement.
And the virtual format's already part of this bill too, actually. I see it on page 2, line 19. If there's not a virtual course.
If there's not a virtual course, the requirement could be waived by the director. So
Yeah, so
basically, there is a requirement for the Department of Audit to offer a virtual course because
So we don't need that language, I don't think.
I agree. I don't think you need the 4 hour either, but maybe you could say within the course offered by the Department of Audit, it could be at maximum 4 hours, something like that. I'm not sure. Could be something that worked on with LSO, and then we should take it as a personal committee of the whole amendment too.
Well, it's not too hard. I think if we narrow the motion down to training shall not exceed 4 hours, and they can use their personnel time, that's pretty easy. So we take them one at a time and then take up your second.
Totally fine, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman.
All right, any other discussion on this amendment? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that's been adopted.
Figure it out.
Does that make sense what we just adopted?
Yes, but I don't know where you're putting it.
Yeah.
We don't know where we're putting it either.
But you just said training should not exceed 4 hours.
Correct.
Okay, I wrote it down, but I didn't know where to put it.
Training shall not exceed 4 hours, and they may use their personnel time
Okay,
for it.
Personal time?
Personal time. Yes, their time for being personnel.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I will make an amendment to strike section 2, and I'll explain it if it gets seconded.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second so we can.
Seconded by Representative Haroldson.
Mr. Chairman, given the Department of Audit's testimony, I do think it is important for there to be some training available for the governing board. If you have a treasurer, because you still have to have oversight over the treasurer, you need to know what the treasurer is supposed to do, right? So I think that making sure that the governing board has that material available, even though it's not a requirement anymore, but at least making sure that the governing board still has materials available for them will let them have correct oversight over their treasurer or their other person that handles accounts. So just to be clear, the repealer is about who is or is not a public officer. It repeals the governing board being a public officer if there is no person, if the governing board doesn't directly handle the accounts.
Any other discussion? Representative Haroldson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think the danger of this is we do cast a really wide net then. That is the danger. So you're pulling some people in that will be going through training that probably don't need to go through training. But on the same point, you do catch other things in that net too that maybe do. I don't know. I definitely see why they took it out. So probably at this point, I don't know if I'm 100% sold on deleting that.
Representative Ottman?
Just for a point, okay? The reason that I feel so strongly about this, I'm not up for wanting people that volunteer their time to feel like they wasted it or they can't do it. But when you take the responsibility to handle a position, whether it be whatever kind of board, you're responsible. And I live in a county where I have had 2 embezzlements, and I have a couple other boards that are the most unruly people that you can meet, and there's problems. And so it's partially because the governance, the people that are in governance don't see the value of the responsibility of that position and also knowing what's going on. Because as was mentioned before, the person that does the books usually is the person that stays, and the other people come and go. So that is why I feel like it is important that they have, and anybody that wants to volunteer for something should be able to spend 4 hours of their life to get some training on what that board is about and the financial, where the money comes from and where it's supposed to go, my opinion.
Representative Knapp?
Just following up on that, Mr. Chairman, because this encompasses so many you're right, this encompasses so many boards, but it's always difficult when you fix a road or have an improvement service district and they've already gotten the money and the thing's already done for people that ever take an interest again. But this is about people receiving money to fix problems within their area, within their neighborhood. And with that comes responsibility of managing that and auditing that and making sure that those funds are not subject to fraud too. So I think I understand people's inability to want education on it or be responsible after the money's been given, but the fact is, it is public funds and monies have been given and there's a responsibility to that, and so that's why this exists.
Representative Yin?
Mr. Chairman? Oh, yeah.
We're not gonna table it. We're almost done.
I will say just briefly that the reason I feel comfortable with removing the repealer is because we've struck all the minimum training requirements, and there's no penalty for not doing the instruction. Basically, it's saying the Department of Audit will have materials to give to the governing board. So I do think it's still appropriate for them to have materials for that governing board, even if there's no requirement and there's no penalty. Since the language is so much softer now, I think it's safe to put the governing boards back in it by removing the repealer.
All right, you ready to vote on the amendment? We really need to vote. We're late, so. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Oh, the amendment was adopted. I thought based on the discussion, it was going the opposite direction.
Question on the bill.
Sorry, one more real quick.
Hold on
Sorry.
1 second. Going back to our first amendment, I think where you put it is on page 2 after line 21, on line 21 after prohibitive. Insert training shall not exceed 4 hours. And that they may use their personnel time. Personal
Okay.
time.
And can I ask another question?
Yes.
Is before we vote? On page 3, after, in line 1, you had inserted trainee must be a bona
We
fide.
removed that from the
You
amendment.
removed that one?
Yep.
Okay.
We can do it first.
You have another amendment?
Real quick, Mr. Chairman, on line 13, page 3, just eliminate July 1st, 2024 and insert immediately.
So make the act effective immediately.
Correct.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Representative Yin. Discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? You got it? Do you got all the amendments?
One more question. Section 2 has been
Section 2 has been deleted.
deleted. Okay,
Yep. Section 3 is amended and section 1's amended.
got it.
All right, you ready to vote? Okay. we please do a roll call vote on House Bill 81?
All righty. Representative Chadwick. Representative Haroldson. Representative Harshman has submitted an absentee vote of aye. Representative Knapp.
Aye.
Representative Newsom. Representative Ottman.
Aye.
Representative Wiley. Representative Yin. Chairman Olson. Okay, 9 ayes do pass with amendments.
Adjourned.